All right, hello everyone. I'm Leonardo Lima, and I'd like to welcome you to another session of the J Champions Conference 2022. Today, you'll hear the survival guide for the Java architect in the cloud era. My fellow Java champion that will present this very trendy topic is Otavio Santana. He has almost, if not all, Java related accolades. From being a Java champion, Oracle Ace, Jakarta EE ambassador, JCP All Star, like not, everything that JCP has already have a title for. Otavio is one of them, and also including Apache and Eclipse Foundation. So yeah, Otavio is it's everything that OSS person can be. So we're talking about Eclipse. A huge shout out to the Eclipse Collections crew, so that we are promoting in this stream. They are a project close to our hearts, and they help developers with the best collections frameworks for Java. So if you would like your maps or your collections at all, maybe new collections, check Eclipse Collections. It's a very good project. So Otavio will take questions during the talk, so please feel free to fire them in the chat, and we will highlight them as they come. Otavio, please go ahead and have a great session.
Okay, thank you, Leo. As always amazing to talk with you. We share presentation with you.
Yeah,
By the way, thank you to be an amazing host. Leonardo is a great guy who
thank you.
was a JCP executive member, Java
Yeah,
champion as well, committed several open source products that includes measurement API, Eclipse collection, JNoSQL. By the way, he was the first success case of Jakarta NoSQL
yep,
and mainly the guy who helped us to create the first Jakarta E specification.
yep.
So
Thank you.
thank you,
Yeah,
Leo.
yeah,
That was
sure. But
amazing.
it's today is about you, so go ahead and start your session, please. See you soon.
And
Bye bye.
hello, Jasper. Hello, Brad from Chicago. Hello, I had no idea how to say your name. 8787. Hello, John from Berlin. So thank you, everybody. I'm glad to be here. My name is Otavio Santana. Today, I'm from Brazil, but right now I'm living in Portugal. And today, let's talk about the survival guide for the Java architect in the cloud era. Um, I did not did this presentation alone, so I did it with Barbara Rosali, who is my colleague. So please follow us on Twitter at Otavio Java and BR Rosali. Yes, double L because it's a Italian surname. Please follow us on Twitter. A little bit about me, but thank you, Leo, to introduce me. So, Otavio Santana, right now, I'm working at as distinguished engineer at Zup Innovation, who that is a company, a Brazilian one, who decided to use Brazil as industrial pole to make technology instead of just use. So, usually in Brazil, we are an outsourcing company, and Zup decided to, okay, let's create technology especially with open source as well. As you can see, I'm not Jean Valjean. I'm Java champion. Everything that Leo already said. Plus, I'm writing book and articles, especially and mainly about technology, cloud, and Java. So, again, please follow me on Twitter. But thank you, Leo, to remind that today is not about me. Today is not about Leo. Today is about you. How you can learn more about cloud. How can I create application that is faster and move more quickly and stable with more reliability in the cloud? But first, we need to understand what cloud is, right? Before talking about cloud, we need to understand why do we care a lot about cloud. Because previously we had waterfall, and with waterfall we decided to have a deploy window where we did deploy every month, every 2 months, with a long time to do a deploy of any kind of application. Because of that, we understood that we need to make it faster to give more feedbacks to application, to give more feedbacks from the users to don't lose time at market. Then we decided to do the incremental way to receive more feedbacks. And then in 2001, Agile methodology was born with the Agile Manifesto. The main idea is to make a tight integration between user and developers. Individuals interaction over process and tools, working software over a use documentation, customer collaboration, responding to change over follow the plan. Okay. The main point about Agile is to do an integration between software developers and users. And for sure, that is not enough, right? Because okay, if I have a application ready to go in production, but my operation team does not provide a culture to make me able to put my code in production, it does not make sense to me, right? That's why right now we have the culture of DevOps, where I mix the developers with operation as a single team to break down the silos to avoid a great hour of China. And with more ops, for example, we have business developers operation, and I guess the most famous one, especially after uh, the Log4j aspect, that is the Sec DevOps, where we talk more about security as prevention, where, okay, I have an option to avoid nightmare, I have process to avoid a headache about process. So let's take this. Let's use security in the process in our pipeline. Today is not about to talk about technology. However, if you'd like to know more, especially tools about security, you can go to orosec.io, where we get more information about an open source tool to avoid vulnerability in your code. So orosec.io. I will share the link here with Leo because I'm gonna skip this. So the main point here is break down the silos. And yes, cloud is amazing. However, it has several traps, right? We need to pay attention to not do the same mistake that Icarus did, fall down, because okay, as much higher we we are using cloud, we have more resource, we have more features, we need to face more issues. Because remember, when you talk about architecture, everything is about trade-off. So w- once we talked about agile, when to break down the silos, there is several discussion about the best approach around cloud. But if you ask to me, what does cloud mean? Basically, it's somebody else's problem. Is when I decided to pay somebody else to handle that to me. So if I don't want to handle the hardware, I pay somebody else. If I don't want to handle the operation, I pay somebody else, and so on. Yes, I know there is this National Institute of Standard Technology that has a fancy definition, but to me, it is still a somebody else problem. I guess you are familiar with the pizza as service, where we do analogy between pizza and cloud. I don't like to repeat myself around this situation because you probably saw. And the whole point here is delegation in the process. So you can do everything at your home, right? So like on premise, where you need to have the hardware, you need to have the operation, and also the software knowledge. And as much you go deeper in the right side, you're gonna decrease the complexity because you pay somebody else to handle that complexity to you. For example, infrastructure as service, where I pay hardware to somebody else handle to me. At this moment, if the hardware is somebody else's problem, then I decide to go to deeper on the right side and decide to use platform as a service or PaaS, where I delegate the hardware plus the operation. The main focus here is developer. So I have the knowledge to write code. I'm a software developer, an architect, and I will delegate everything else to another company. For example, Platform Sage, Hero Code, Elastic, and so on. And the last is I don't care about anything. I don't care about hardware. I don't care about operation. And I don't care about knowledge to write my code. So I pay a SaaS such as Gmail, Netflix, whatever. If you look the whole perspective of service, is a service where you delegate to have more abstraction. And because of that, I probably will pay more, but I have less complexity on my side. I have less headaches on my side. On this perspective, we have more flavors in service. So I already talked about IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, but we have more derivations. For example, right now we have the CaaS or container as a service, where it's between IaaS because it decreases the complexity in the infrastructure, but it's not abstraction off because you need to handle that. So it's not PaaS. So it's a between IaaS and PaaS. And also, I'm talking about PaaS. I have several specialization of PaaS. Remember, the main focus of PaaS is developers and software engineers. So I have decision and process as a service. I have database as a service. I have backend as a service, function as a service, or serverless. Those are the derivation of fast because there's a service, especially to programmers and engineers. Okay, and more SaaS. The number of flavors are increasing a lot, especially because the proportion of cloud are increasing and rise as well. And once we talk about cloud, it's impossible to don't think about the cloud trend and buzzword because right now, in the past, we had cloud, so everything talked about cloud. Then we moved to cloud ready, where I have my application who is able to run in both, so um, on premise and in cloud. So it might run in cloud. Then we moved to cloud friendly, where I have my application that run on premise, but also must run in cloud as well. And finally, the cloud native, where my application is cloud first. Therefore, I need to think an application looking to the cloud or the cloud perspective. I don't even think about on-premise anymore. It's cloud native, cloud first, whatever. But also, we talked about cloud. We need to explain more about the buzzword around cloud right now. And yes, cloud native become a huge buzzword in our applications. But what does mean cloud native? To be honest with you, I have no idea, and I strongly doubt that there's somebody who knows this approach. I'm gonna show to you several approaches about cloud native. For example, here I have Pivotal, who has the approach of okay, cloud native is an approach to building and running application that take advantage of cloud computing model. If I take a look in another uh, definition of cloud native, we have a book that is Architecting Cloud Native Application, where cloud native is a different way of thinking and reasoning about software system. It's more about infrastructure than software itself. The next one has the same thoughts about cloud native. So it's more about a new world doors where I have independently deploy, update, replace, and scale. So the main point here is go more on operation and DevOps culture than something else. This one here is my favorite book. It's so far Cloud Native Transformation. And to the author, Cloud Native is more than a tool set. It's a complete architecture and philosophical approach for building application to take full advantage of cloud computing. The main point here is okay. It is not just operations kind of thing. The engineer need to think, the developers need to think, the product manager need to think as well, and also the user. They'd like to use something around the cloud. Okay, so that's to me it's uh, m- more the way that I believe there is cloud native. They mentioned something about okay, in the past we had waterfall, we are living in agile methodology, and the next step is cloud native, where we have the huge integration, huge automation in the cloud. We also have the CNCF, that is Cloud Native Computing Foundation, where it has this definition. To be honest, that's not my favorite one, especially because it's too abstract. So empower organization to build and run scalable application in modern dynamic environments such as public, private, and hybrid clouds, containers, service mesh, microservice, immutable infrastructure, and the Cloudnative API exemplifies this approach. To me, is a little bit weak and so generic and a bunch of buzzwords. So I don't like the CNCF definition, but it's still a green area, and there is no a strong definition about the what cloud native mean. So everybody has your own definition. You can see several articles that relate cloud native with container-based environments, or if you create application that was born in the cloud, it's cloud native, or if you create application with microservice, it's cloud native. Um, the main goal here is not to go deep on that definition, but to me, for now, cloud native is a set of good practice to optimize an application in the cloud through containers, orchestration, and automation, where you take the full advantage of the cloud, you take your full advantage of containers, orchestration to manage the whole containers, and lastly, with automation with CI/CD, and the whole good practice to make my software easier to go on production. The main point here is to delegate, reduce the abstraction to go faster in the cloud. But as I mentioned, the survive guide, we also need to think about the challenge, right? So how can I survive in this area? If I you suggest the top five or the most challenge to me, I will suggest roots, okay, because I need to make sure the URL public must go public, the private one must be private, networking, this kind of thing. Mainly because of that, I need to think about security, right? Library security, access security, layers, tiers, the whole methodology. Upgrade the database and language. It's a must, right? Especially because Java is increasing the number of features, performance, make our life easier with the latest version of Java, and also fix of bugs or security issues, CVE, backups. Yes, it still matters to us. And yes, the last CI/CD, everything's about automation, right? I need to make sure that when a code goes to production, it's safe to go to production. And when we have this challenge, we have the trade-off, the complexity that we mentioned before, right? So IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. I need to choose between them, especially because, okay, if I go to this way, I probably will pay more, and I will decrease the complexity. If I decide to use IaaS, I will decrease the complexity of hardware, but I still need to have people to do the operation thing. And I need to hire people. Maybe if you go to PaaS, where you need to decrease the complexity. However, I need to think about the vendor lock-in. So I have a bunch of challenges to decide. Especially, I need to choose between complexity and price. And when I have lesser abstraction, I will have higher risk. And when I have higher abstraction, I will need to pay more. So it's not a easy it's not a easy choice. I need to choose carefully about each one. And overall, the knowledge management. For example, if I decide to stay with the infrastructure, I need to have an operation team. If I I don't have, I need to use a pass, but I need to pay more, and probably I might have a vendor lock-in. So is in the architecture perspective, everything is a trade-off. So as a good recommendation of book, there is this book by Mark Richard and Neil Ford, The Fundamentals of Software Architecture. And also there's a second one about the hard part of software architecture. And yes, it's a huge challenge to us. Each one should I choose, each one should I go. We have a huge number of tools, we have a huge number of decisions. Where should I go? To make our life easier, I really recommend you to follow these tips. The number one is this amazing book here. So 97 things every cloud engineer should know. Okay. Um, I loved G6 one. So use many service, please buy them more. Or if you're able to use a pass, come on, use pass. You don't need to do everything by your own hand. Keys it. So keep it simple. Solves code management for software delivery. So everything is a code, infrastructure as a code. So it's easy to you to go deeper and create a manageable operation. It's okay if you don't follow the trend. So it's okay if you're not you running Kubernetes. Michelle Brenner, why every engineer should be a cloud engineer. And yes, the last one is container aren't magic. So please careful about your decision in the cloud. So it's okay if you're not running Kubernetes. You need to understand more about the this flavor service that we are in the market right now. That is the first tip about good practice in the cloud perspective. For sure, we have the 12 application, but once we talk about DevOps culture, we have infrastructure as code, where we have a huge alignment with DevOps culture, where you can do your code with operation. We have a higher speed and efficiency, and we have more consistency because you know exactly what is going on with your code. Okay, it's much easier to you to understand everything about the operation because everything is more declarative on that API. As a next step of infrastructure as a code, I really recommend you to follow the GitOps, where in a single repository I have both. I have the source code of my code, my application, and also my operation source code. Once we have both on a single repository, I have a Git as a single source of truth, a Git as the single place where we operate. For example, okay, I'd like to create a new feature in the repository, or if I'd like to update or do an upgrade of any kind of language or database, it's still the single repository. And all changes are observable and verifiable. If I'd like to upgrade my version to Java 17, I'm able to create a PR and test it, and then go to production, and automatically it will upgrade to Java 17. And yes, it's only possible with CI/CD. So I really believe that infrastructure as a code plus on Git, it's a GitOps. So to me, is the next step of uh, DevOps culture. The traditional one, the 12-factor application. So I believe I don't need to mention that again or go deep on that situation where I have 12 good practice to follow. So code base dependence. So avoid to sending the code base in email. So use a repository dependence outside the code as management, such as Maven, Gradle, so on. Configuration, please don't put passwords or any kind of thing directly in your code. So you can replace that with environments. In the Java world, we have several tools such as Eclipse configuration. Spring has your own configuration, microprofile, Quarkus, and so on. And the whole point here is follow this to have good practice till you have a health, uh, more safe, and more scalable application. Old but gold. Okay, if you are a Java developer, it's a must follow and must read books. So, Effective Java, the third edition, DDD, Domain Driven Design, Clean Architecture, and Clean Code. For sure, if you are not Java developer, you can skip the first one because the first one is more to define good practice, define okay the best way to use collection, when to use a collection. Um, for example, lambdas, method factory, how to use a none, and so on. DDD to take your code closer to the business. Clean architecture to make sure that you split your business between your code. Clean code to make your code more easier to read and more readable. Okay, and there's amazing books where you should pay more attention if you did not read. So read it. And every time that I mention about okay hype words, hype trend topics, I need to talk about microservice, right? Because microservice become like a trend. However, it's not a mandatory architecture. Okay, you still have the power to choose microservice when it makes sense. Okay, not every time makes sense to you to use microservice. As you can see, Sam Newman has two books and article about microservice, and the first two chapters is about okay, first pay attention and make sure that it makes sense to you to run uh, microservice. Sometimes it's better if you use, for example, a monolith. And another point is microservice to database, Etanaga wrote, and I decided to put in highlight. And briefly, it is about just because Amazon and Netflix decide to use microservice, it does not mean that you go to microservice mainly because you're not Netflix and Amazon. So understand first your case. Start with the why. Okay, let's go to the question. So about 12 factor application, what about database? Each database vendor has your own best practice. For example, with SQL, we need to pay attention and backup, upgrade. your version. Use SQL as much as possible to avoid vendor lock-in, right? Is important to us. And on the other hand, we have no SQL database. First, pay attention on the documentation of each NoSQL database because each NoSQL database has your own private behavior and it makes sense, mainly in the configuration. For example, we need to think about scalability. We need to think about the knowledge to operate this NoSQL database. For sure, right now we have database as a service to everything. So if I decide to use Cassandra, I have Astra, that is a Cassandra database as a service. MongoDB has your own solution, Neo4j as well. And you need to put your mind about the CAP theorem. So CAP, so let's write down here, where briefly there is no perfect word. So in the distributed database system, we have consistency, availability, and fault tolerance. And usually you need to choose two because it's impossible to have three in a single database. Okay, for example, okay, you like to use consistency and availability. So you're gonna you're gonna skip the fault tolerance, for example, and go deep on the database. When you talk about NoSQL, thank you, Leo. We have ACID and SQL database where atomacy, consistency, I forget the I, sorry, and is more about okay, I have precision to do something, I have transaction to make everything okay or not, like a precision is more important. And another hand, I have base where it's baseable, basically available, where my main focus is easy availability. So, in one hand, I have asset that is has a huge precision, or happen or not happen, like a clock. And the base, we have the hostile, where okay, you must be at, you must be in the queue. It doesn't matter the time that you be in the line. Okay, so that is the advice about database. Hopefully, I answer your question, Flavio. Let's go to the next question. Do we have? Okay, let me check here. Okay, Otavio, do you recommend working microservice with CQRS pattern? Yes, you are able to use that. Indeed, you can do that with monolith as well. For example, if you are using NoSQL database, for example, Cassandra, you probably might have one API to write and one API to read. Because, for example, with Cassandra and NoSQL in general, we don't have the normalization process. Our main focus is to go to query first. So basically, we read, we write of one way, and then we read in another way, another perspective. So it's recommended if you do microservice with CQRS, if it makes sense to you. However, it's not only to microservice. For example, you can do API with BFF. Yes, it's not about best friend forever, but it's backend for front end, where I create APIs specifically to a front end. So I can use CQRS to make it possible. Okay. Okay. Let's one more question here. Spanner, Yugabyte, DB. Those are amazing solution. Um it's previously known as NewSQL, where I have SQL with more NoSQL behavior, where I try to mix between SQL and NoSQL. Okay, but again, the CAP theorem is still valid, so please pay attention because so far it's impossible to you have the whole behavior of the cap, consistency, availability, and fault tolerance all the same time. So with this new SQL, you can mix between SQL and NoSQL. Even the classic ones. For example, Postgres right now has a JSON feature, for example, MySQL as well. So you are able to choose if you're gonna use a scheme database structure or a schemaless inside a Postgres or inside MySQL and so on. So this new SQL solution, and I enjoy too much. Is a kind of a good solution, a good mix. And another device about database is the multimodal one, where you are able to mix several models and with a single operation. For example, a DB, where you can use several. Okay, let's take the link here. A DB, where you have several behavior or several models in a single operation. For example, here, okay, let me share the link here to you, Leo. Here we have key value, document, graph uh, in a single operation. So it's a kind of good way. Okay? Thank you, Leo. You are amazing. Okay, let's move on. So as I mentioned, microservice is a good way. So use with moderation. First, understand if it makes sense to you, and then move forward to that decision. Remember, mostly microservice is about the organization, the the scalability of your people and your team, than the application itself. Remember the Cowell's law. Once we talked about modernization, go faster in production, move your application around. Let's talk about the hypothesis-driven development, because we tried several ways to test hypothesis on production if without break anything. Finally, with the good practice, we understood that we can move faster in the cloud with that approach. Okay? And with hypothesis, I can test one theory with a small bucket of people or a small ring of people, and then increase if that makes sense. For example, it happened with one click buy button. For sure, they try it with the whole checkout process and a single bucket or a single ring with a single button feature. Again, it's not about it has a bug or it does not have a bug. It's more about it makes sense to my business or not. So I want to test a theory or hypothesis, test in production with a small ring, and then make bigger if it makes sense, or decrease the number of users if it does not make sense. It happened the whole time. For example, if you are using Facebook, if you are using Netflix, if you are using Uber, it's happened to you right now, but you are now able to see it. And to us, the hypothesis is evolution to make more even faster. Remember, cloud, delegate, decrease the complexity, uh, DevOps and Agile to more integration to break down those silos and put your code more faster to production. And us, right now we are working on open source product that is Charlie CD that has a theory of ring deploy or circle deploy, because to us, this idea is the evolution of deployment, because right now it's not just about test my application to make sure if it's working, it's not working. I'm able to test if it makes sense, if this feature makes sense to my business or not. I'm able to create circle or rings to test my hypothesis. And again, if it makes sense, I can increase. For example, here, I have my circle of QA and my circle of dev. I put this information in my header, or doesn't matter how. And based on that, I can mix, for example, I have my application A with my connection Y to my QA people, and I have my application A with, or application Z with my database Z to my dev people. But also think about uh, users. So I want to test a feature only in Sao Paulo, only in Germany, only in Berlin. So I'm able to test, and if it makes sense, increase to the country. If it makes sense, increase to the whole Europe. If it makes sense, to the whole continent and maybe the whole planet. So I can increase the test if it makes sense or not. And based on that, we created the Charles CD. So it's a deployment in circle or rings based on Kubernetes to follow the whole practice of CNCF, Cloud Native. Why did we choose Charles? Basically because you believe that the theory of evolution, the one who is able to evolve faster will survive in the market, right? And with hypothesis, you can survive or adapt even faster. Again, agile is more to adapt and move your application faster and then cloud. And Charles CD, I really believe with hypothesis deploy is the next level of that idea. Okay, let's go. What is about Charles CD? So it's a native, so CNCF native. It's open source, and yes, you can integrate with CI/CD. Here we have a couple of presentation. For example, I have my ring where I'm able to put a name, for example, TDC, that is developer conference, where I'm able to create this ring of release. Okay. With this circle, I can put some segments. For example, I want on this ring, on this application, I want to test people from São Paulo. Okay. I put the city, I put equals and the value São Paulo. So this ring will try my hypothesis only the city of São Paulo. Based on that, I did my deploy in my application. I put my segment to finally check if it makes sense to me using metrics. Okay, so I can check the if there is error in the business perspective or in the application perspective. And if it makes sense, I can increase the number of people who is there or decrease. It's a little bit different of the canary deployment because in the canary, I'm not able to create segments. So I need to create a percentage of the request, but I'm not able to check the metrics if it makes sense or not. Okay. Um, Charlie's is even more about it. So we have automatic circle promotion by metrics. We have notification, therefore we're able to integrate with GitHub, GitLab, Git wherever. We have workspace, use management, configuration, and yes, integration with the clouds, especially because the CNCF approach idea of philosophy. So you're able to use it with Azure, Doc Hub, Amazon ECR, Google Clouds, and you can do deploy every single day. That includes right now today on Fridays. So if you want to know more, check it out the Charlie's. Let me share the link as well. So charliescd.io. where we have a couple information. And yes, we also have a book about the best practice about cloud, software architecture, and so on. In if you want to know more, let's share the link of the book again. But I guess Lee, you can put that on the description. Please follow. It's for free. You can get the whole information. By the way, if you want to get more free books, let's share the link again here. And that is it. So hopefully, I hope that you enjoy. And yes, we have more time to questions. If not, thank you everybody. Please follow us on Twitter. Keep in touch. We're able to talk about.
I'm back. Yeah, sorry. It took me longer than I realized to join. So, yeah, I don't think we have any pending question. Jasper took some comments regarding the new sessions and also about the heterogeneous backends. So, they're good comments. I don't
Thank
know
you,
if
Jasper.
you go
I
over
saw
them.
that.
I think it's a useful information for the attendees, so you should look into that. But we don't have any other questions. So thank you, Otavio, again for your time and the presentation. And again, people follow Otavio so that you can get the latest and greatest about open source software. He's really into that. It's impressive. Like 4 years that I know him, he's really how do I say very a good proponent of taking projects open source. So yeah, follow him for all good open source Java stuff. And that's it. Thank you guys. See you next time.
Thank you, everybody.